Welcome to the Vikings Vintage, where we talk Vikings history. This week, we're doing our first series and revisiting Viking seasons. Tonight, we're doing 69, the 1969 season. We'll be doing other seasons later, but we thought that we'd go ahead and would start with the championship season that the Vikings, the one time they actually did win. Um, so, we're getting into it.
Vikings, let's win this game. Score Vikings, honor your name. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run out the score. You'll hear us yell for more. Vikings, Score Vikings, let's roll.
So, the 1969 season. I know they didn't win the Super Bowl that year, but they did win the NFC Championship game. Uh, the NFL champion that year against the Browns. So there is that. It wasn't the league didn't merge until the next year. So statistically, and by NFL, the Vikings do have a championship.
Yes, Vikings. The Vikings were NFL champions. It does count as an NFL championship. The Super Bowl, really, the first team to win the Super Bowl when the teams merged was Baltimore. Up until then, it was two separate leagues, and the champions of the football world were the team that won the Super Bowl. That's how they were labeled. So, but yes, the Vikings do have an NFL championship.
Yep. So if you go on NFL.com, it'll say Vikings championships won. so we do have that championship. I wasn't here for it. And
I was a baby. I was what, 3? So I learned a lot about that season from the highlight reel, from old newspapers, and from my dad. That's why I know so much about. That's why I know what I know about the '69 season.
And so, of course, everybody knows about the Chiefs. The ham sham. Doing the first guy being mic'd up on the sideline as a coach.
Yep.
So even in the preseason, they had a good season. In the preseason, they only lost one game in the preseason.
Right. Yeah, and that was when preseason was 6 games long.
Yep, 6 games.
It was 6 games long, and then they opened up the season against the New York Giants at the old Yankee Stadium because that was the home state. That was the home field for the New York Giants at that time.
And they actually lost that game. It was 24-23.
Yep. And a couple of notes. Fran Tarkenton was quarterback in the Giants in that game. And Gary Quazzo started for the Vikings that game. Joe Kapp didn't play. Gary Quazzo started the game. And for those that are curious, there is a little snippet of the game. It's on YouTube. I think it's only like the first half, which the Vikings played their best ball in that half of that game. So I see in the chats it was a 14-game season. It got to be a 14-game season in 1961. And it was 12 in 1960. That was the last year of the 12 games. They added 2 more games, 61 up until 77.
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys, Tony and I talked about this earlier. I don't know if you guys saw there was an issue with YouTube posting up a totally unrelated thumbnail for some reason. The one with the picture in the background, that's the one that I created. I have no idea if you guys saw the other one, where that came from. That
There was one with
misspelling of
the
season and
spelling
all
was
that.
all bad.
Yeah, I have no idea where that one came from. So if you had two thumbnails tonight, I apologize. I don't know what YouTube is doing. I only made one. Uh, so yeah, I mean of course Bud Grant was the coach. They went 12-2.
Hmm.
They led the league in total yards, total points. Sorry, they scored 300. They scored 379 points, and they only allowed 133.
Which was a record at that time.
Scoring 50 or more points in 3 games.
Yep.
They had 12 straight victories, the longest single season winning streak in 35 years. Became the first modern NFL expansion team to win an NFL championship. Their defense, considered the most intimidating in the NFL, was anchored, by the Purple Plate leaders, Gary Larson, Alan Page. Gary Larson, who's the one of all the Purple People Eaters, Gary Larson and Sutherland are probably the two less talked about. But Gary Larson was on the '69 team.
Yep.
Secondary was Bobby Bryant and Urswell McAbee.
Ursel McBee.
Ursel McBee, okay. Um, like I said, I don't know how you pronounce it. And then Joe Cap, of course, was the quarterback. But as Tony said, he did start that game.
He did not start the Giants game. He I don't know for injury or whatever, but he's back then he split a lot of time with Gary Quazzo.
Yeah.
I think Quazzo was the better passer, but Joe was the leader. So they lost that first game 24-23. They had a 17-7 lead at one time, and Tarkington rallied the Giants. And a little side note to that game, the New York Giants gave the game ball to one of their defensive linemen because he played one of the best games that new coach Alex Webster for the Giants has seen in a long time. That defensive lineman that the Giants gave a game ball to was defensive tackle Bob Lertzema.
He gave the Vikings game plan.
He gave the game ball to Lertzema, and 2 years later, Lertzema's a Viking. So
Famously, or infamously, or
Yep.
infamy. Yeah.
Yep. And so they lose that game. So they lose coming out of the gate. And then they come home the next week and they face the defending NFL champion Baltimore Colts.
And that game wasn't even close.
Wasn't even close. Joe Cap played. Now, Joe Cap, they put a beating on him in that playoff game in December the year before in '68. Baltimore did. Joe remembered it. Joe Cap throws 7 TD passes. Now, here's where I'm going to test my knowledge here. You're going to have to help me out on this, Catch. I'm going to name off the players who caught TD passes from Cap. Do you have the game up there?
Let me see. I'm trying to. So, let me see. I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay.
I don't know if they got. See, I'm trying to see if they got game by game on here.
You might have to look at Pro Football Reference.
That's where I'm at.
Okay.
All right.
And they should have the scoring.
Yeah, they have all that.
You ready?
Let me see here. Hold on a second. For some reason, I have my text on my computer small anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Pro Football References get it even smaller.
Right. Because I can tell you right now, and I'm just going off the top of my head, he threw 2 TD passes to Gene Washington. He threw 1 to Dave Osborne, 1 to Bob Grimm, 1 to Kent Kramer, 1 to Jim Lindsay, and another one to Beasley, John Beasley. Did I say Beasley already?
So, So, as you said, 2 to Washington,
Okay.
1 to Beasley,
Okay.
1 to Grimm
Okay. I said Grimm.
with Lindsay,
I said Lindsay,
Kramer,
Kramer,
and then
and
Hall,
and Osborne.
and Osborne.
Yeah, I got it right. Wow. I got it right. Yep. Yeah, he matter of fact, he had a fractured I think he had a fractured left thumb, a fractured thumb, and he went back into the game and threw TD passes. He got knocked out for a minute and then he came back in.
Yeah, so he was
Um
28 for 43 for 449 yards,
mhm.
1 touchdown, 1 interception, and 1 sack. His long was 83. He
That
had
was
2
Gene
rushes.
Washington.
He had 2 receptions for 14 yards. The leading receiver was Gene Washington. He had 6 receptions for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Okay, yeah, that was the start, and they rolled in that game 52-14.
Yeah, and Oscar Reed was the leading rusher with 29 yards.
That's all he had was 29 yards.
Yep, Oscar Reed had 29 yards. Bill Brown had 26. Harris had 12. Osborne had 7, and Clinton Jones had 4.
You know, and those numbers that Cap put up then in '69, those are like standard numbers today.
Yeah, 449 yards. Yep.
Yeah, and the attempts and the completions.
So Oscar Reed was the only one who had more rushing yards than receiving yards because Bill Brown had 28 yards receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Harris had 13 yards receiving.
Oh, Billy
Osborne,
Harris. Billy Harris played that game, huh?
and he had 12 yards rushing, 13 yards receiving. Osborne had 80 yards receiving and a touchdown. And Clint Jones had 4 yards rushing but 7 yards receiving. So pretty much Oscar Reed was the only one who had more rushing yards than passing yards
Okay.
in that game.
Yeah, and that was the start. That was the beginning of the win streak that would be 12 games.
Yeah, because they won the first game of the season and they lost the last game of the season, but they won every game in between.
Yeah. Yeah, lost the first, lost the last, and won the games in the middle.
Yeah.
Who they play the next week? Was it Chicago or Green Bay?
Green Bay, 19-7.
That game was played at the University of Minnesota's Memorial Stadium. They couldn't play at Met Stadium because of the Major League Baseball playoffs. The Twins were playing the Orioles, so they had to play that game at Memorial Stadium, and he beat the Packers. And this was a game where the Viking defense, they sacked Bart Starr 8 or 9 times. And they controlled the game. The Packers scored with like 5 seconds left in the game.
They sacked him 8 times.
Sacked him 8 times, yeah. They sacked him 8 times. Wasn't the best offensive game by the Viking offense.
No, Cap only threw for 100 yards.
Yeah, Cap, I mean, as great as a leader as Cap was, he was not very good as a passer. That's why they got Quazzo. Who was the leading rusher? Was it Dave or Bill?
Oscar Reed again.
Was it Oscar Reed again?
14 carries, 72 yards.
Okay.
And then Osborne, 15 for 46, and Brown for 6 for 29. Clinton Jones.
And here's the thing with Oscar Reed. Oscar Reed was a starter. He was on the bench.
So it does not look like there was only one offensive touchdown. Dave Osborne.
Yeah, from like a yard out.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then does it say when the Packers scored their touchdown?
Let me see. That's a different screen. So first quarter, Fred Cox 2 field goals.
Okay.
Second quarter, Osborne's 3-yard rush.
Mm-hmm.
Third quarter, Fred Cox 41-yard field goal.
Okay.
Fred Cox 32-yard field goal. And then Dave
Hampton.
Dave Hampton 7-yard pass from Bart Starr. And it doesn't say, it doesn't have like the time on it. It just has what they scored.
Okay, yeah, because I think they scored at the end of the game, and
Yeah,
they had been shut out. Minnesota shut them out. I think Vikings had 2 or 3 turnovers, I believe.
3 turnovers.
3 turnovers, yeah. Um,
They had 6 penalties for 93 yards. Packers had 5 penalties for
yeah,
68 yards. Damn
nah.
refs. Uh, the Vikings had 28 foil rushes for 108 yards. Packers had 24 rushes for 108 yards.
Hmm.
Vikings had 38 for 157 yards.
And I think
So neither.
the Packers starting backfield was Bart Starr, Donnie Anderson, and Jim Grabowski.
Um,
Oh, Bob Swede, yes, Clint Jones was on the '69 team.
yeah, they also had Elijah Pitts. Wasn't he a head coach? Is that guy?
That's Ron Pitts' dad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Elijah. He ended up in Chicago,
Yeah.
and but yeah, that was the defense was like 5 seconds away from a shutout, but you kind of knew something was brewing with the team. Thanks, George.
Yep.
Um,
Appreciate you, George. Yeah.
you kind of knew something was brewing with the team, and then the next week, I believe they went to Chicago.
Yeah. So the next week was Chicago. And so they were at the Giants. Then Baltimore and Green Bay were at home.
They were both.
And they
They
like it
were
was
One was
Memorial
at Met
Stadium,
Stadium. One was at Met Stadium. The
the
Baltimore
Brick
game was
House.
at Met Stadium, and then the old Brick House Memorial Stadium was where the
Yeah,
Packer game was.
that's the Gophers Stadium, correct?
Yeah, this Gophers home. That was the
Yeah.
Gophers Stadium.
So then they had 2 road games. They went to Chicago, and then they went to St. Louis after that. But the Chicago game, uh, they that was one of their first shutouts, 31-0 in that
Yep.
game.
Shout out the Bears. Played in the rain. Um, they earned their first shutout as a team. The Vikings controlled it from start to finish. The Bears weren't a very good team. They weren't a very good team that year, and the Vikings took advantage of it.
So it's 56 degrees, wind of 13 miles an hour, humidity of 73.
Yep.
So I can imagine that would definitely start to
Yeah,
rain with that much
and
humidity.
the Bears at that time didn't play at Soldiers Field. They played at Wrigley Field.
Yep.
So that was the Bears' home stadium. The Bears moved into Soldier Field until '71. So it was muddy. It was old school football, muddy.
And Dooley was the head coach of the Bears.
And Dooley was a head coach.
Yeah, the Vikings were 3-1 at this time. The Bears were 0-4.
Yep. Question: What was the scoring?
Okay, let's see.
Yes, he was, George. He was an Iron Man. I was upset when they traded him in '78. We got Ricky returned, but I was upset.
So Mike Bailey, special teams fumble recovery in the end zone.
Oh, Mike Riley.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Like I said, the print on this is very small. I have my computer zoomed in to like 300, and it's still tiny. So,
Riley blocked a punt and recovered it in the end zone. Yep.
Yeah.
He is a former Bear, as a matter of fact.
And then Beasley, a 1-yard pass from Cap.
Okay.
Fred Cox, 24-yard field goal.
Okay.
And this answers George's question. Clinton Jones, 18-yard rush.
Okay.
And then Dave Osborne, 58-yard rush. That was scoring.
Yep.
So it was domination because it's 19 first downs for Minnesota, 8 for Chicago. 37 rushes, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns for Minnesota, 22 rushes, 54 yards for Chicago, 110 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for passing for the Vikings. 14 of 27 for 96 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions for the Bears throwing.
Okay.
So total yards was 256 for Minnesota, 119 for Chicago. 4 turnovers for Chicago, so they had 3 picks plus that special team.
And they fumbled the ball.
Yeah.
So
So
right then the defense, you could tell the Viking defense was getting some confidence, so they're starting to dominate people.
yeah, they had Virgil Carter
That was the quarterback, yep.
and Jack Connicannon.
Concannon, yep.
Yeah, he was the other quarterback. Con Canyon threw one interception. Uh, Carter threw two.
Okay. I know
Yeah.
Ursa McBee had one of those interceptions.
Let me see. Let me see if it brings that up. Dick Buckus had an interception for the Bears in that game.
Okay.
Bobby Bryant had two picks.
Oh, Brian had two and McBee had the other one.
McGee had the other one. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And then Clinton Jones had one kickoff return. And then Dick Gordon and Gale Sayers. Gale Sayers had three kick returns for 101 yards in that game.
So he had that's damn near
Pretty
40
much all their
45 yards.
offense.
That's 45 yards a pop on a kick.
33.7 yards a pop. But what you consider total yards in the game,
He had
special
more
teams
kick
is
returns than he did the whole
special
game.
teams is included in that.
They included the special teams?
I believe special teams are included in total yards.
No, they're not. No, special teams are their own stat. Yeah, special teams is their own stat. Return yards are their own stat too. The only thing you take away from like offensive stats, well, this is what I did when I did stats.
Well, the sacks.
The sacks you take away.
Yeah.
So you have net yards and then you have total yards. The net yards are total minus how many yards you lost in sacks.
Because in NFL, sacks are taken away from the passing yards. In college, they're taken from the running yards.
Yep, that's the difference. Yep, that's the big difference. So, yeah.
I mean, the Bears had to be awful that year.
Yeah, they weren't very good. And I think, what's his name played in that game? Brian Piccolo. Because I think Piccolo was a starter with the Bears.
If he played, he didn't have any rushing or receiving yards.
Okay.
Because he's not on here for list.
Okay.
So the running backs are Ronnie Bull and Gale
Ronnie
Sayers.
Bull, yes. Ronnie Bull, okay, and Gale Sayers.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. And then Ross Montgomery had 3 yards. So that's just weird. They formatted this wrong. Piccolo is not with the rushing; he's with the receiving. That's why I missed it.
He caught a pass.
No, he had a rushing attempt, one for 7 yards, and he had two receptions,
Okay.
2 for 7. So they usually do like the running backs when they get rushing yards, they're on top. And if they don't have any, yeah.
Are you on? You're on Pro Football Reference, right?
Yeah.
They kind of put everything in one lump category.
Yeah.
So you kind of like you'll get like the rushing yards, but then you got to scroll over and get the receiving yards.
Yeah, but usually they do. But from what I'm seeing, usually if they have a rushing yards, they're put up top, and then they have a separate section for receiving yards. But they had Piccolo at the very bottom of everybody.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I missed him. Yeah.
And so right now we're what 3-1.
3-1. Yep.
So then they go to St. Louis, which they usually didn't win in St. Louis against the Cardinals. That's one team as a franchise. The Cardinals were always a problem, but they handled the Cardinals. Beat them 27-10.
Yeah, 27-10. The Cardinals were 2-3.
Yep.
Vikings were 4-1. So basically, it was, and it was at
Busch Stadium.
They played at Busch Stadium back then. There's a lot of multi-purpose stadiums back then. I think most of them were probably built for baseball, and then they just added football to them.
Yep. And with the Cardinals, they were one of the few teams that both their baseball team was named the Cardinals and the football team was named the Cardinals.
Right.
But the football Cardinals came from Chicago.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, they handled that one. They won that one 27-10.
Better late than never.
Yeah, welcome Norpheus. Cap looked good. The defense played their asses off. Put it that way.
Um, so Joe Cap was 14 of 31 for 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. But he was sacked 5 times.
How many times was he sacked?
He was sacked 5 times.
Wow.
And then Dave Osborne, 44 yards rushing. Oscar Reed, 31 yards. Clint Jones, 21 yards.
You know, if you notice something, it's weird. Oscar Reed,
who no one ever talks about.
Oscar Reed had more rushing yards than Clint Jones. Clint Jones was the number 1 draft choice in 67. Yeah. But Oscar Reed was outperforming him, and Reed did become a starter later on. He did. Years down.
Yeah, but he's probably one of the least known players in that area. A lot of people don't talk about Oscar Reed.
No, he had a nickname called the Seed, but he was
yes, Norpheus. It's another Gamecock.
But he was kind of the unheralded Viking. He had some moves. He was a good running back when he played.
Yeah, so Charlie Johnson, that's a name from the past. He was the Cardinals quarterback.
Yep, Charlie Johnson. Oh God, let me think. Who else was on those Cardinal teams?
Another great name.
Which one?
MacArthur Lane.
Lane was with the Cardinals then. He ended up with the Packers and then the Chiefs. Yeah. He was with the Cardinals. I think they had Johnny Rowland. I want to say what I don't think I'm trying to think when Deerdorf got drafted. I don't know if Deerdorf got drafted in 70 or 69, one of the two.
He doesn't give offensive linemen on here, unfortunately.
Okay. Jim Hart was on that team.
He was a backup. No, he wasn't the starter yet.
He wasn't a starter. I think he might have been hurt. He got hurt a lot early in his career.
But here's Jackie Smith was a tight end.
Jackie Smith was their tight end, yes. Jackie Smith was their tight end. Larry Stallings played linebacker for him. I'm trying to think. Who do they have on their offensive line? Ernie McMillan was on their offensive line. I think he had to block Jim Marshall.
The person they have listed here is Bob Rowe for defense.
Bob Rowe, yeah, he was on there.
He had an interception return for a touchdown.
Oh, is that how they got their touchdown?
Yep.
He was a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a defensive lineman. So
Bob Lee punted in that game.
Bob didn't play it down a quarterback. He was our punter.
And of course, Fred Cox, perfect again.
Yep. Yeah, matter of fact, Fred kicked a 50-yard field goal. Or 51.
They don't have it. They have a 21 and a 15-yard field goal for him. In this game.
I thought he kicked a 51-yarder.
Says Fred Cox, 21-yard field goal. Fred Cox, 15-yard field goal. Unless they typed it in wrong.
It's a typo. That 15 is a typo.
So it's supposed to be 51 instead of 15. It's supposed to be 15 instead of 51.
Yeah, it should be. It said it should be 51 instead of 15.
Yeah.
Did John Henderson score a touchdown that game, or was it Gene Washington?
John Henderson had 2.
Oh, 2 touchdowns?
7-yarder and a 39-yarder.
Okay, Beasley had the other touchdown.
Yes.
Okay.
And then was it Backen?
Jim
Yeah,
Bakken.
he had a field goal in that.
Okay.
So yeah, so Cardinals got the field goal, then Beasley got the 12-yard pass, and then Rowe had 18-yard interception return, and then it was all
It was all Vikings after that.
after that. Yeah, so it's 27-10. Um, Charlie Wimmer was the head coach of the Cardinals.
Okay.
Yeah, it says Civic Center. I never knew it was called Civic Center Bush Memorial Stadium. I always thought it was just Bush Memorial Stadium, but it says Civic Center on here. So,
Civic Center was next door.
And they had
It was like a whole big complex, and Civic Center was next door.
and the Cardinal logo is pretty cool. It's the Cardinal running underneath the arch.
Oh yeah, that's their classic logo. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the classic logo.
and the Vikings logo has to change. It's the Norse head with the old style Norse head. So
No, the only thing they did was shorten the braid.
yeah,
That's all they did, and kind of define the horns a little better. But still looks the same for the most part. So we're what 4-1 up to this point?
right now they are 4-1, and they play the Lions. Then they have 3 straight home games. The next
Okay.
one's against the Lions.
The first one was against the Lions.
Yep, and that was
They-
24.
They won that one 24-10. Ursel McBee had 3 interceptions. I think the Viking defense had like 9 sacks. They got a lot of sacks on Detroit. But once again, I mean, Cap played well, but he didn't have his best game.
So it was 6 sacks. of
6
Greg-
sacks. Okay.
Of Greg Landry.
Okay.
Joe Cap was sacked 4 times himself, so there was 10 sacks in the game.
10 sacks in the whole game. Yeah. What else do I remember from the highlights there? Who's the leading rusher?
So the leading rusher was Brown.
Bill
12
Brown.
rushes for 12 rushes for 33 yards.
That's it?
Dave Osborne 11 for 20. Clinton Jones 3 for 4. Oscar Reed 1 for 1. Gary Quazzo 1 for -4.
We could not run the ball.
It's like last year. Gene Washington 4 receptions for 68 yards.
Okay.
Bob Graham 1 for 44. John Henderson 1 for 31. And then Washington's was a touchdown. And then Brown and Osborne each had a rushing touchdown.
Okay. They were relatively short yards.
But Landry had 4 picks. So they had 4 picks, 6 sacks in that game. So I'm assuming they had a lot of short fields. That's why there wasn't a lot of offensive production.
Well, like I said, Ursel McBee had 3 of those interceptions.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Paul Krause had the other.
Paul Krause had the other.
Okay. So
Dick LeBeau had the one for the Lions.
Now, if the name Dick LeBeau sounds familiar, folks, that is the Dick LeBeau that was the defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The same Dick LeBeau.
Did he play for the Bears too, or just the Lions?
He was a Lion. He retired up until the Lions.
Okay.
So the Bear you're thinking of is Richie Pettibone.
Okay.
The Redskins coach from years ago. He was he played with the Bears for years.
So each team had 13 first downs. Detroit 33 rushes for 107 yards and a touchdown. Vikings 28 for 52 for 2 touchdowns.
Who the hell is running the ball for the Lions? Mel Farr, I think.
Larry Watkins had 11 rushes for 34 yards. Artie Taylor?
Altie Taylor.
9 for 17.
Okay.
And then Nick Eddy, 5 for 16.
Who's the first guy you said?
Larry Watkins.
Larry Walton.
Yeah, they have Watkins here. Watkins.
Oh, maybe they did have a running back named Watkins.
And then Earl McCullough was the lead receiver.
Earl McCullough. Okay. You know who was their punter? Their punter was Lem Barney. The cornerback, the starting cornerback. He punted in this game.
Bob Lee and Fred Cox for Minnesota, Earl Mans, and Lynn Barney for the Lions.
Yep. Earl Mann ended up with the Raiders and kicked for them in the Super Bowl when they beat the Vikings in '76. So he spent a couple of years with the Raiders.
The Lions were 3-3 at this point. So Fred Cox, 33-yard field goal. Gene Washington, 41-yard pass.
Okay.
From Cap. Earl Mann, 50-yard field goal. Bill Brown, 1-yard rush. Dave Osborne, 1-yard rush.
Okay.
And then Nick Eddy, 1-yard rush.
Okay.
So that was the score. And of course, that was outside.
At the Met Stadium. It was at Met Stadium.
40 degrees already.
What was the date?
So October 26th.
Oh, that's the day after my birthday.
So it was 40 degrees, wind at 15 miles an hour. So the Vikings were favored by 16 points.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
It says Vegas line, Minnesota Vikings -16, so they're favored by 16.
Damn.
So they didn't even cover.
No, they didn't even cover. So we're what, 5-1?
Yeah, 5-1, and then the next game is also at home. That was the second game against the Bears already.
Okay, right there, we sacked Bobby Douglas 9 times. Clint Jones had an 80-yard TD run. I remember that. Joe Cap.
And the Bears were 0-7 at this
Yeah,
point.
the Bears were bad. They were bad.
So scoring, George Washington. Gene Washington, 20-yard pass from Joe Cap. My favorite president, by the way. So Brian Piccolo, 7-yard rush.
Piccolo, okay.
What year did he pass away? 70?
70. Passed away in 70.
Okay. The Fred Cox, 48-yard field goal. John Beasley, 13-yard pass. Dave Osborne, a 1-yard rush. Clint Jones, an 80-yard rush. And Gale Sayers had 24 yards. How do you go winless with those two running backs?
Hey, you also had Dick Butkus on your defense.
Yeah.
Who was Dooley was coaching them. It wasn't Hallis, it was Dooley.
So the Vikings were favored by 15, which doesn't make sense why they'd be favored more against the Lions and the Bears, but the Vikings were favored by 15.
And that was
Bobby Douglas was sacked 9 times for 78 yards.
Yeah, they beat him something fierce.
Cap was sacked 4 times. Quazzo was sacked once.
It's 5-10.
So the offensive line for Minnesota doesn't seem to be really good.
Well, then,
or was Cap scrambling?
Well, Cap scrambling.
Yeah.
And Cap would be the one to run with the football and want to take out somebody. But that, and plus it was a different game, different style of play back then. I know. How many yards did Clint Jones have with the 80-yard run? How many yards did he have altogether?
88.
Wait. Okay. He had 88 yards rushing.
Yep.
And his longest gainer was the 80-yarder?
Yep.
How many carries did he have?
3.
No, that's not too. Well, 3 carries. He broke one.
Yeah.
That's what? 20.
Osborne was 12 of 79. So Osborne was a
workhorse.
Yeah. And then Bill Brown, 9 for 21. Oscar Reed, 1 for 1. Joe Cap only completed 9 passes.
How many did he throw?
18.
50%.
And then Quazzo was 0 for 3 with 1 pick.
Okay.
64 yards for John Henderson. Washington, 29 yards and a touchdown. Beasley, 13 yards and a touchdown. So they only had 1 catch, but it was for a touchdown.
Okay.
Lead receiver was Bill Brown. For the running backs, he had 3 for 22.
Okay.
Yeah. So the INTs was Lonnie Warwick,
Okay, Lonnie Warwick, the middle linebacker.
right? And then Doug Buffone and Joe Taylor had the picks for the Bears.
Okay.
But
Doug
it doesn't have
Buffone.
sacks on here because they didn't keep track of
They
individual
didn't
sacks.
keep track of sacks.
Yeah.
That's probably mistake number one. Um, so then we're what, 5-6-1 right now?
Vikings are 6-1, and like I said, the Bears are 0-7. Unfortunately, they don't play the Bears again.
No, but the next week they played the Cleveland Browns and beat the crap out of them.
So the week after that was the Cleveland Browns. It was 31-14. I'm sorry. Yeah,
No, that's
51-3.
51-3.
51-3. I was looking at the score from the Bears game.
Yep.
The week
Yeah,
before.
that was 51-3.
So it's 51-3. The Browns were 5-2-1 because they didn't
The
have
Browns
overtime.
came in hot. The Browns came in hot. They were right up there with the Vikings, but the Vikings took it to them. The defense took it to them. It was embarrassing. I think the Vikings scored on their first 9 possessions. They scored points.
So yeah, there's looks like they scored 3 times in the second quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So 47 degrees. The Vikings were favored by 8. Obviously, they covered.
Yeah, they covered.
So first, Gene Washington 16-yard pass from Cap. Fred Cox field goal. Gene Washington 10-yard pass from Cap. Then the Browns scored. Don Cockcroft, 28-yard field goal. Fred Cox 28-yard field goal. Gene Washington 1-yard pass. Dave Osborne 5-yard rush. Clint Jones 1-yard rush. Fred Cox 32-yard field goal. And then Jim Lindsay 2-yard rush.
Yeah, it was. That was Minnesota dominated that from start to finish, and right there, you kind of got a sense, even national league wise, like nationwide, that the Vikings were the top team in the NFL.
So total yards, the Browns had 151 total yards. They had 4 turnovers. Vikings had no turnovers and 454 total yards.
I think Bobby Bryant had 3 interceptions that game.
Let's see.
I know Paul Krause. I think Paul Krause had one for sure, but I think
Bobby Bryant had 3 for 62 yards.
3 interceptions. That's what I thought. And here's the thing: Bobby Bryant didn't play in the Super Bowl. He was hurt. I don't know what game he got hurt in, but he was hurt, so he missed the Super Bowl. Bobby was on all 4 teams, but he only played in 2 Super Bowls. He missed the Steelers Super Bowl too. He was on injured reserve.
So they only allowed 1 sack. Cap was sacked once for 8 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Nelson was sacked twice.
Yeah, but they beat on him all day.
And Jerry Rome also played too.
Yeah, they beat on those Cleveland quarterbacks all day. They were physical with them. Eller and Marshall just put a beating on them, especially Eller.
Yeah, that was that. Unfortunately, it doesn't say they didn't keep track of QB hits. They didn't keep track of all that stuff they have nowadays. Back then,
Mm-hmm.
Leroy Kelly had 6 carries for 24 yards, and one of his runs was for 10. So he had 5 for 13 on all of his other attempts.
Right.
He had 2 receptions for 28 yards. Reese Morrison 1 for 15.
Mm-hmm.
Bo Scott 1 for 2, and then Ron Johnson had 2 carries for 1 yard. And then
Ron Johnson ended up with the Giants. That's the same Ron Johnson that became a 1,000-yard runner with the Giants. The Browns also had Leroy Kelly, the Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Then the leading receiver was Dave Jones, 2 for 33.
What did Paul Warfield do?
1 catch for 27.
Okay.
And then on the Vikings side, Oscar, let's see. Also, 3 quarterbacks played in this game. Joe Cap was 16 of 24 for 223 yards, 3 touchdowns, no INTs.
Okay.
Quazzo was 4 of 8 for 51 yards. And Bob Lee got to play quarterback as well.
Oh, they did put Bob Lee in there.
Yeah.
Well,
Each of
yeah,
them.
you're up 51-3. I should imagine you would.
And Joe Cap and Bob Lee each had a rushing attempt. Oscar Reed had 9 for 51 yards.
Okay.
Dave Osborne was 10 for 48. Bill Brown was 7 of 46. Clinton Jones was 8 of 24. Lindsey was 1 of 2. And Billy Harris was two carries, 1 yard. Gene Washington, seven catches, 119 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Okay. You know what? Seems like Oscar Reed was always the leading rusher, and they never gave him a starting gig.
Seems that way.
Yeah, they never, and Bud never started. Oscar didn't start until what, 72? He was a leading rusher in 72.
Was that just because he relied on the starters, or?
Well, and Bud was loyal to his core players to a fault. He was loyal to Dave Osborne and Bill Brown. Which I don't blame him, because they were both dependable.
Yeah.
I think Osborne suffered an injury in 71, which kind of opened the door for Clint and Oscar. And then Bill Brown just got older. He just got older. So Snead was in Philadelphia at the time, Bob. We didn't get Snead until 71. So but yeah, so the Vikings are cruising right there.
As of right now, after that Cleveland game, they are 7-1 after the Cleveland game.
Yeah, they were just unstoppable. Who was next? Green Bay?
It's that weird Green Bay game, 9-7.
Yeah. That game was what game? I mean, do we have a game last year? Yeah, the Raider game. Only with more scoring. It was basically, for everybody that kind of wants an idea of what that game was like, it was like the Raiders game that we played last year. Only difference was points were scored. Vikings won it 9-7. 3 field goals, and that was a defense. We blocked a field goal. I think Carl Kasulki blocked a field goal that could have gave Green Bay the lead, and then Bobby Bryant got an interception at the end of the game to close it out. But I think Quazzo and Cap played the game.
I can understand why it was so bad, because it was 28 degrees with a wind chill of 18.
Yeah, and that was played in Milwaukee County Stadium.
Yeah.
It wasn't played in Lambeau.
So it's 18 first downs for Minnesota, 10 for Green Bay. The Vikings defense actually shut down Green Bay. The offense for Green Bay didn't score.
Right.
14 rushes, 156 yards for Minnesota, 26 for 87 for Green Bay. The Vikings only threw for 146 yards. Green Bay threw for 151. So total yards was 270 for Minnesota, 225 for Green Bay. So basically, it was a 3-0 Raider game.
Yes, yeah, it was close.
Quazzo was 11 of 16. Joe Cap was 4 of 11 for 41 yards. The leading rusher was Dave Osborne, 14 for 58. Bill Brown, 49 yards rushing, and Oscar Reed at 32. And the leading receiver only had 44 yards, so it was not an offensive game at all.
Who was the leading receiver?
Gene Washington, 44 yards.
Okay.
And then it was Henderson had 36 yards, and then Osborne was the next. But for the Packers, Bart Starr was 12 of 21 for 151 yards, no TDs, and 2 picks. And the leading rusher for them had 39 yards. Their leading receiver, Carroll Dale, had 61 yards receiving. So he probably had the best game of anybody.
Carroll Dale, if that name sounds familiar, folks, he became a Viking in 73.
So Bobby Bryant and Lawrence Warwick had the 2 picks for Minnesota.
Oh, Lonnie with another interception.
And then Don Hart is the reason the Packers scored. He had that 1 reception for an 85-yard return.
Who did he throw it to?
It doesn't say who the pass was intended for. Well, Doug Hart was an interception return for 85 yards.
Oh, Doug Hart. I thought you said
Yeah.
Don Hart.
Oh, and then Willie Wood had the other pick for Green Bay.
Oh, Willie Wood was still playing for him. So was Willie Davis. I think Herb Adderley was still with the Packers then too. Nishke was still there. Most of the other guys, Jerry Kramer had retired. Most of that, so they were playing a different line.
And the Packers were 5-4.
Packers were 5-4. So we ended up being what, 8-1?
The Vikings are 8-1 at this time. Yep.
Okay. So who do we play next week?
So after the 9-7, it's the Steelers, and the Steelers were not good at this time. So it was this was, like I said, they scored 3 games where they scored 50 points. This was the third one.
Yep.
So the Baltimore 52-14, the Browns 51-3, and then Pittsburgh 52-14.
Yeah. And this is the only name you'll probably recognize on that Steeler team that was playing then. There may be a couple. One was Joe Green. He was a starter. Andy Russell. I think Rocky Blyer was in Vietnam then. I don't think he was with them in 70.
Terry Hanratty.
Terry Hanratty. This is the year before they got Bradshaw. That's about it.
J.R. Williams, maybe. J.R. Wilburn, sorry. John Henderson, you might know. But, yeah, it was not. So, 48 yards rushing, 100.
And Noel was their coach. Chuck Noel was their coach.
So, Chuck Noel was their coach. They were 1-9.
Yep, and we were 9-1. What was the temperature? Was that Met Stadium? What was the temperature?
It was Met Stadium, yes. It was 32 degrees with a wind chill 25. The Vikings were favored by 19.
Is a heat? You know what? That's November. It's a heat wave.
Yeah. So the Steelers only had a total of let's see, what was it? 145 yards.
Yeah, the Vikings were just staying. By this time, they're just dominant.
So all three quarterbacks played again. Quazzo was. Did they? You said Cap got hurt, right? Because Quazzo seems to be playing. Because Quazzo was 12-19 for 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cap played, so there's 2 games in a row where Quazzo played more than Cap. Cap was 3 of 9, and then Bob Lee was 3 of 4.
Cap couldn't. The problem with Joe Cap was he was not a good passer. I mean, he never threw a spiral. He said, and there was a reason why he never threw a spiral. Whenever he got the snap, he never moved the ball so his hands was on the laces. He just would throw the ball as is. So
yeah,
there was many times where he did not have his hands on the laces. He just threw the ball. And they were some lame ducks.
You could, if you ever watched the video of the 69 season, you could see that when he throws passes.
Oh, there was a joke. They had a joke here in the Twin Cities. Joe Cap tied an NFL record with 7 touchdown passes, and none of them passes was a spiral. They were these lame ducks that somehow found their mark. But Joe was a leader. He was the reason that if a team ever rallied around a player, you have those players that they rally around, and it was Joe Cap.
For as many points as they scored, it wasn't like it was an explosion of offense. I mean, Osborne, 50 yards rushing. Bill Brown, 37 yards. Clint Jones, 15 yards. Jim Lindsay, 8 yards. Oscar Reed, 8 yards.
We took it. You know what had happened? It was probably the defense gave him a short field to work with.
It's got to be because
Yeah,
even for receiving yards, the leading receiver was John Beasley, 68 yards.
the tight end. Yep,
Um,
John Beasley. But yeah, it's when you had a defense like that, they could get turnovers, but they could also give you short yards. You had short field to work with.
Yeah. So the interceptions for the Steelers were Brian Stinger and Bob Hahn.
Oh, Bob Hone, yeah.
Paul Krause had 2 picks. Schockerman had 1, and Roy Winston had 1. Paul Krause,
Ed Sherrockman.
yeah, Ed and then Paul Krause had he had 2 interceptions. He returned 1 for touchdown.
Did he?
77 yards.
Holy crap. Okay. So then, so I think the defense hadn't had a nickname yet. I think it was the national press that started naming them the Purple People Eaters. The Twin Cities press didn't have a nickname for them, but the national press started calling them the Purple People Eaters. They never liked it. Jim Marshall even said that they didn't like the nickname, but it stuck. So, and Cousins is more talented. Cousins is a true quarterback. He's a good quarterback. He just does not have that leadership. Whenever I got on Cousins, it was because he doesn't have the intangibles, and one of those intangibles is leadership. He don't got it. He does not have it. So right now, yes, Norpheus Cap was a linebacker playing quarterback, exactly. So we're what? What are we record-wise? 10-1?
9-1.
9-1. So the next week is at Detroit.
That's at Detroit Tiger Stadium. It's their second shutout of the season.
Yep, that's it was on Thanksgiving. It was on Thanksgiving in a snowstorm. So this time the game's on national television. So the whole country saw the Vikings. They sacked Greg Landry 9 times in that game.
The Lions were actually 7-4.
Yeah, the Lions were playing for a chance to make the playoffs.
Joe Schmidt was the coach.
Yep. The Lions were playing for a chance to make the playoffs. They were kind of trying to get to be that, keep their playoff hopes alive, although Minnesota had basically run away with the division.
It's balmy, 36 degrees.
Yeah, and it was snow. It was a snowstorm. If you ever see the highlights of the game, you'll see that after, once the snow really started coming down and the player jerseys got dirty, you had no idea who was who.
Yeah. So Vikings were favored by 8. Obviously, they covered. Yeah. Osborne, touchdown. Fred Cox, field goal. Oscar Reed, 6-yard pass from Joe Cap. Alan Page, 15-yard interception of return.
That's the play where Jim Marshall intercepted the pass. He's running down the sideline. He's about to get tackled. He laterals it back to Alan Page, and Alan scores. That was the highlight of that game, and probably the highlight of the '69 season. But they had hounded Greg Landry all game. They did. I want to say Carl Eller had 4 sacks that game.
Yeah, Landry sacked 7 times, 57 yards.
7?
7 times for 57 yards.
Okay.
They didn't do anything offensively. The leading rusher had 26 yards rushing, and the leading receiver only had 47 yards rushing.
Yeah, they didn't.
Receiving. And he took away 31 yards that he had on the 1 catch. So
Yeah, they didn't do anything. Yeah, they were basically. It was a wrap. It was a wrap early.
So Marshall ran 30 yards with the interception.
Mm-hmm.
and then Lonnie Warwick had the other.
Lonnie Warwick was a really good linebacker, but he played the pass really well. One thing that the Viking linebackers did was play the pass, but they were good at blitzing too.
Then Marty had the pick for the Lions.
Yep. And so we're 11-1. The next week we come home and we play the Niners.
Let me see. So no, the Rams.
Oh, we go to the Rams. Okay. We go to LA. We face the Rams. The Rams have only lost one game or two games. I think the Rams were they had only lost one game too. So,
so coming in, so the Vikings are 11-1. The Rams were 11-1.
Yep. And the Rams were favored, I believe.
No, Vikings by 1.
Okay, it's a toss-up.
Yeah,
it was a toss-up.
But it was 57 degrees.
That's all. Wait, they were in California and it was only 57 degrees.
Probably wearing trench coats on the sideline. George Allen was the Rams coach.
Yeah, Allen was their coach. Roman Gabriel was their quarterback. Deacon Jones and Merlin Olsen were on the front line.
Tommy Mason.
Mason was a Ram. Yeah, Tommy Mason was a Ram. But we went in there and we beat them. It was a dogfight of a game. No, it was close till the end.
Jack Snow, 7 receptions for 72 yards.
Yep, Viking number 1 draft choice is 65. We traded him to Rams. We got Gary Larson in return, but yeah, we beat them 20-13. I don't know how many sacks we got that game. Does it say?
1 for 3 yards.
Yeah,
the Vikings were sacked. The Rams were not sacked at all.
So the Rams got 1 sack and the Vikings got no sacks?
Got no sacks. The Vikings only had 69 yards passing.
Yep, I believe that.
186 for the Rams. 246 total yards for Minnesota, 247 for the Rams. No fumbles. So the Vikings had the 1 interception.
Who had the interception?
Gabriel had the interception. McAbee had the
Ursel McBee picked him off.
McBee had
the interception.
Yeah.
So yeah, that game was only a 7-point game, but it was a hard fought game.
And then Oscar Reed was the Oscar Reed was the leading rusher. He had 52. Bill Brown had 51. Osborne had 43. Yeah.
Oscar Reed's the leading rusher in a lot of these games. He's still not starting.
Yep. And then Henderson was the leading receiver. 56 yards.
Wow.
So the scoring
who scored?
Osborne, 4-yard rush.
Okay.
Bill Brown, 1-yard rush.
Okay.
Bruce Gossett, 37-yard field goal. Cox, 39-yard field goal.
Okay.
Gossett, 27-yard field goal. Cox, 29-yard field goal. And then Larry Smith, 4-yard pass from Gabriel.
Wow. Damn. That game was closer than I thought. A lot closer than I thought.
Yeah, the game was pretty much even.
Yeah, very even.
The difference was probably the pick.
Yeah, because I think both defenses were 1 and 2. Because I think the Rams defense was playing out of their minds then too. So then the next week, so we're 11-1.
Yep.
And then the next week we got the Niners.
Yep, and that was another close one.
That was at Met Stadium. That was a snowstorm. That was the game where the kid in the hot air balloon got away from he went up in a hot air balloon. He was only supposed to go up so high, and they were supposed to be able to bring him down. Well, he broke loose. He got away. The balloon ended up in the Minnesota River. They did get the kid. They got him. They rescued him, and then they took him back to the stadium. He ended up sleeping in the Viking locker room. So he slept through the second half. But yeah, Vikings won that game. What was it?
10-7.
10-7.
Yep. Dick Nolan was the head coach of the 49ers. Is he the
Mhm.
dad of the Mike Nolan?
That's Mike Nolan's dad. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Bud Grant, Metropolitan Stadium.
John Brody coached was quarterback in the Niners.
22 degrees with a wind chill of 9.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings were favored by 11.
Yeah, that's what was the Niners record coming in?
Niners record was 3-8-2.
3-8-2.
Yeah.
And they were in the playoffs the next year. That was
So
the round.
so there was only a field goal in the first half. A 37-yard field goal by Cox.
Yep.
And then Ted Kwolnick, a 1-yard pass from Steve Spurrier. And then Jane Washington, 2-yard pass from Joe Cap.
Yeah. Yeah, the second half the snow quit. First half it was a snowstorm.
Yeah. So the Vikings sacked Spurrier twice.
Okay. How many times was Cap sacked?
No, there was no sacks for Cap.
Oh, okay. So was Oscar Reed the leading rusher?
Looks like Osborne was.
Okay.
No, Bill Brown was. Bill Brown's 53 yards, Osborne 34, 22 for Reed. And then Washington was a leading receiver.
Okay.
But the 49ers, they didn't have any. I mean, Spurrier actually threw for 292 yards. Joe Cap only.
Well, Spurrier played.
Yeah.
Spurrier played. Yep. Okay, Spurrier. That's right, number 11.
And then Windsor was the leading rusher for the 49ers. He had 5 yards.
Okay.
Willard had 2. Willard had 4. Cunningham had 2. And Tucker had 3. The leading Dick Witcher had 72 yards. So he was the only one who did anything.
All right.
Ted Kwolnick only had 1 catch for 1 yard.
Yeah, Kwolnick was our all-pro tight end.
So
Kwolnick was our all-pro tight end. So
Kermit Alexander had interception for the 49ers.
Okay.
Roy Winston and McBee had another one.
McBee had another interception. Okay.
Yeah.
So we ended the season so we're 12-1. So then we go to Atlanta and lose a meaningless game, and it was a rainstorm down there. It was that was
10-3, same score. The Falcons were 6-8.
Yeah. Okay, the starting quarterback for the Falcons was Bob Berry. Their head coach was Norm Van Brocklin. Okay. So they got a measure of revenge. Those two.
It was 36 degrees. Vikings were favored by 6.5.
Yep. Yeah, it was last game of the year. Quazzo and Cap played.
Yeah, Quazzo threw for 62 yards. Cap didn't throw for any.
Yeah.
Cap had 2 picks.
Did he have 2 picks?
He was 0-4 with 2 picks.
Good Lord.
Yeah, the Vikings only had 167 yards total yards. The Falcons only had 111. The Vikings had 5. They had 8 turnovers. They had 3 picks and 5 fumbles.
Yeah, that was the last game of the year. How many turnovers did the Falcons have?
Falcons had 3.
Okay.
And he turned up the ball over 8 times.
The Falcons scored on a fumble. Claude Humphrey picked up a fumble and scored a touchdown.
24-yard touchdown.
Yep, 24-yard fumble return. I think it was either Cap or Quazzo that fumbled. It was a strip sack, basically.
And then Bob Etter kicked the 28-yard field goal in the third quarter.
Who scored the touchdown for the Vikings? Or was 10-3? Never mind.
It was Fred Cox kicked the 19-yard field goal.
Okay. Yeah.
But I imagine they probably would have scored more if they didn't fumble. If they didn't turn the ball over 8 times. So Paul Krause had the pick for the Vikings.
Okay.
Al Lavin had 2 picks for the Falcons, and Rudy Redmond had a pick for the. It doesn't say anything about the fumble recoveries or anything like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so the Falcons, Bob Berry, Bruce Limmerman, Harrison Waggles, Cannonball Butler. Have you ever heard? I've never heard of that name before.
Yeah, I've heard of Cannonball Butler.
Charlie Bryant, Gail Cogdill, and Jim Mitchell. I don't know any of those guys except for Barry, obviously.
Harmon Wages, I knew. Jim Mitchell, I knew.
This is when the Falcons wore this cool uniform. This is when the Falcons uniforms were the best too.
Yeah, they wore those black uniforms with red helmets.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they were the black unis with the red helmets.
So yeah, that was the meaning of this game.
So yeah, it was the playoffs were the next week. Against the Rams.
It doesn't look like they took any time off. Playoffs.
No, you didn't have a bye week.
So Vikings were 12-2,
Mhm.
Lions were 9-4, Packers were 8-6. The Chicago finished 1-13.
Yep. And I think Chicago ended up getting Abe Gibran as a coach the next year.
Yeah, tie games were not officially counted until 1972.
Oh no, they didn't have overtime until 74.
So the Bears were 0-8 they were 0-6 in the division, and they were 0-10 in the conference. So they beat an AFC team that year. Yeah, so there was pretty much back then. It was 4 teams made the playoffs.
Yeah, from now this will be a trivia question for a lot of people. Name the divisions, because there were 4 divisions in the NFL. The Minnesota Vikings were always in the Central Division. There was the Coastal Division, the Century Division, and the Capital Division. The Central and Coastal were in the Western Conference. The Capital and Century were in the Eastern Conference. So Minnesota won the Central that year. The Rams won the Coastal that year. Cleveland, I'm not sure if Cleveland was in the Capital or the Century.
I think they were in the Capital.
Cleveland won the Capital and Dallas won the Century. So that was your playoff setup for 69.
So Central, the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
Coastal was the Rams.
Yep.
Okay, so the Browns were in the Century.
Okay.
The Cowboys were in the Capital.
Okay. All right.
So the Capital was the Cowboys, Commanders, Saints, and Eagles.
Yeah. So basically, that conference stayed the same.
And then the Centuries, the Browns, Giants, Cardinals, Steelers.
Okay, so the Giants moved to the East, the Browns to the AFC, Steelers to the AFC. And who was the other team?
Coastal was the Rams, the Colts, the Falcons, and the 49ers. The Century was the Browns, the Giants, the Cardinals, the Steelers.
Okay, the Cardinals moved to the East.
Yeah.
So in the Coastal, which became the West, the only team that moved was Baltimore to the AFC, and New Orleans took their place.
Yeah.
So they kind of had the divisions built in.
Nice to know that the Central is the one that has not really changed over the
Yeah, the
years.
Central is the one that's never changed. That one's got the history, even with Tampa Bay. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then of course playoffs started, and I'll tell you what, that playoff game against the Rams was a tale of two halves.
Yeah. So 3 weeks prior, 3 weeks prior to the playoff game, the teams met in Los Angeles in a battle between they were before so the line so the Rams were undefeated. It says between undefeated Rams 11-1, 11-0, and the 10-1 Vikings. The Vikings won the game 20-13, and then the rematch was played in the cold and snow in Minnesota. Um, let's see. Actually, forward it. Okay, and then in the game, uh, the Vikings shut down the Rams wide receivers in the outside running game. So in this game, the Rams attacked the middle of the Vikings defense and neutralized the Vikings pass rush with short passes to the tight ends. The Rams defense had Minnesota's offense in check. The fearsome force on defensive line, harassing Vikings quarterback Joe Cap early. The momentum seemed to be in LA's favor. Rams safety Richie Pettibone recovered a fumble from fullback Bill Brown that gave his team a first down on the Minnesota 45-yard line. On the next play, it appeared the Vikings took a quick lead as Carl Eller intercepted a Roman Gabriel pass and returned it for a touchdown, but the score was nullified on an offside penalty on Alan Page. So then, taking advantage of the second chance, running back Larry Smith gained 19 yards on 3 carries, and Gabriel eventually finished the drive with a 3-yard touchdown pass to tight end Bob Clean. The Vikings quickly stormed back, Cap completing. Why does it keep moving up? Okay. Where was that? Vikings. Okay. The Vikings quickly stormed back with Cap completing four consecutive passes on a 10-yard play, 75-yard drive. 3 of those completions were to receiver Gene Washington, including a 27-yard reception to give the Vikings the ball on the Rams' 4-yard. Dave Osborne did the touchdown.
Okay, yeah.
And then it says the LA moved the ball effectively on the next drive, but it ended on a missed 38-yard field goal attempt by Bruce Gossett. Next time they got the ball, they did much better, taking the majority of the second quarter, including a 13-yard run by Gabriel on a converted third down. And then Gossett finished with the field goal to put the Rams up 10-7 with 4:30 left. So then the Vikings punted after they got the ball back. And then Gabriel led his team back for more points. Completed passes to Bill Truax.
Billy Truax.
Okay, to gains of 18 and 18 yards, 13-yard play, 65 yards, right, and with a 2-yard touchdown. So the Rams were leading 17-7 at halftime.
Yep.
And then the second half, the Vikings head coach Bud Grant did something that KOC doesn't do. He adjusted his defense to stop the Rams tight ends. His Purple Eaters continued to punish the Rams running game. They also got increasing pressure on Gabriel. Grant neutralized the Rams pass rush by having quarterback Cap run the ball, either on design plays like quarterback draws or rollouts, or by instructing him to take off and run the first sign of pressure. Cap began frustrating the Rams with runs, and the threat caused their pass rush to be less aggressive. After forcing the Rams to punt for the first time in the game, the opening possession in the second half, Cap completed a 41-yard pass to Washington to LA's 12-yard line. After a Rams penalty and a 5-yard Cap run, Osborne finished the drive with a 1-yard touchdown run. So it's 17-14 at this time. Minnesota's comeback attempt suffered major setback over the next few drives against the punishing effort from the Rams defense. Next time the Vikings got the ball, they drove deep into the Rams territory, only to have Cap throw an interception to save safety Ed Meteor at the Rams 4-yard line. Meteor fumbled the ball during the return, but linebacker Jim Cornell recovered it. LA had the punt, and then Cap was intercepted again, this time by Pettibon, and returned the ball 4 yards to the Vikings 36. Once again, the Vikings defense bent but didn't break, stopping the Rams at the 10-yard line. They had to set the Rams settle for a 27-yard field goal.
Mhm.
So it was 2014 going into the fourth quarter.
Yep.
And then Cap subsequently marched the Vikings 65 yards down the field, completing 3 passes for 40 yards and going to the final 2 yards himself as Minnesota took the first lead of the game 21-20. With 8:24 left on the clock, the Vikings defense took over. After the special teams unit tackled returner Rob Smith on the 12-yard line during the Zoom kickoff, Carl Eller sacked Gabriel in the end zone for a safety, giving the Vikings a 23-20 lead with the ball. But the Rams defense held, and 1969 NFL MVP Gabriel began to march the Rams down the field to the last 2 minutes, and across the midfield appeared the Rams might be trying a field goal or a winning touchdown, but Gabriel pass was flipped and intercepted at the Vikings 43-yard by Alan Page with 30 seconds left. So I didn't realize that game was so back and forth.
It was tense. It was very tense.
So it was 23-20. It was the game was 11 degrees with a negative 12 wind chill.
So that game was 11, huh?
Yeah.
It was cloudy, 11 degrees, which had an effect on the Rams big time. Yeah, it was a tale of two halves. Tale of two halves.
So that was the box.
So we win that game, and then Cleveland destroys Dallas.
Yeah. So total yards was close. It was 255 for the Rams, 275 for Minnesota. The Vikings fumbled 3 times, but they only lost 1.
Okay.
But they had 3 picks. And then the Rams had 2 turnovers, so 1 fumble and 1 turn.
The fumble and the Alan Page interception.
Yeah. So Joe Cap was the only quarterback to play that game. 12 of 19 for 196 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, 2 sacks. Leading rusher was Dave Osborne with 30 yards.
Jeez.
The leading receiver for the Vikings was Washington with 41.
Much different football back in the day, folks. Much different football.
The leading rusher for the Rams had 17 yards.
Was that Smith or Josephson?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. That was as long. 60 yards was long for Smith.
Okay.
And then the leading receiver was Billy Truex, 47 yards.
Truex, yeah, and he was a tight end.
Tommy Mason had one attempt for 2 yards.
Okay. Yeah, that game, I mean, they were those two, the Vikings and the Rams, were probably the best teams in the NFL at the time. I think the defenses were 1 and 2. So,
So they actually have the starters listed for the playoffs, but not for the regular season. So the starters for the Vikings were Cap, Osborne, Brown, Henderson, Washington, Beasley, Alderman, Valone,
Jim Valone, Mick Tingelhoff,
Milt Sunday,
Ranieri.
And Ranieri.
Yep.
And then Carl Eller, Larson, Page, Marshall, Winston, Warwick, Hillenberg, McBee, Schockerman,
Kasalki and Krause.
Kasalki, yeah.
And Sharachman was playing for Bobby Bryant, who got hurt. So, yeah. But I mean, that was, and I think the Rams. Who do the Rams have on defense?
That Marlon Jones isn't. Sorry, Marlon Jones. So the Deacon Jones,
yeah,
Merlin Olsen, Coy Bacon,
Okay.
and Talbot were the defensive
Dyron
line.
Talbert.
Yep.
Okay, most people remember Dyron Talbert with the Redskins.
And then Jack Purdy,
Jack Pardee, he became coach of the Bears
and
years
then
later.
Doug Woodleaf.
Oh, Woodleaf, yeah.
Yeah, Maxie,
Maxie Ballhan,
uh,
who ended up
uh,
coaching the Vikings at one time.
Clancy Williams, Jim Nettles, Richie Pettibone, and Eddie
Ed
Meteor.
Meter.
Yeah.
Yep, Ed Meter. So what did the Rams offense look like?
So Gabriel was the quarterback.
Okay.
Larry Smith, and then Les
That's
Josephson,
Josephson. He was from Minnesota.
Wendell Tucker,
Okay.
Jack Snow,
Mm-hmm.
Billy Truex,
Okay.
and then Cronin, Mack,
Charlie
Inman,
Cowan, Tom Mack, Ken Iman.
Lathold, and then Brown.
Roger Brown.
Yeah, so those are the starters at
Yep.
Packers. Yeah.
Bob, they didn't get Fred Dreyer until probably 74, I think. 74. Youngblood was drafted in 71, so was Isaiah Robertson. But yeah, that was at the end of because Roger Brown retired. Uh, Deacon, not Deacon. Lamar Lundy had retired. Coy Bacon. Now here's where they should have had records for sacks. Coy Bacon one year had 30 sacks in a season. He's never credited with it. Deacon Jones had 34 sacks in a season, never got credited with it. The record is what, 22 and a half
Yeah.
from Strahan? Yeah. So, they never got their credit they deserve. And their sacks don't even count in the NFL record books. So that's the
Yeah.
disgrace.
Didn't someone say Deacon Jones was like the sack leader?
Yeah, it should be Deacon Jones. I think it is Deacon. Somebody went back and added up all the stats, but here's a kicker: the NFL doesn't acknowledge them. They're not going to be in the record books. They might be
Yeah.
in Pro Football Reference, but they're not going to be in the record books. So we beat the Rams, and it's on to the NFL Championship.
Yep. And that's against the Cleveland
Okay,
Browns.
now it was a sunny day. I need you to look up the temperature
Okay.
because I think it was like maybe 7 or 8 degrees above.
So it was 8 degrees with the wind chill of -6.
Okay, it was freezing.
And the Vikings were favored by 8.
They covered. The Vikings came out of the gate. The Vikings had that game won in the first quarter. They had that championship won in the first quarter. They scored on their first 2 drives.
Yeah, it was 14-0 after the first.
Yep.
So Joe Cap 7-yard run. Gene Washington 75-yard pass from Joe Cap.
Yeah, and that 75-yard pass, the guy that was covering Gene Washington was Erich Barnes. He fell down, literally slipped on the turf. And Washington was wide open to catch the pass over the middle and clear sailing to the end zone.
Yeah, so it says Cleveland had lost the previous season's NFL title game 34-0. So it says the Vikings dominated the game, ranking up 381 total yards without losing a single turnover, while Cleveland gained just 268 yards and turned the ball over 3 times. The Vikings took the lead 4 minutes into the first quarter, driving 70 yards for a touchdown in 8 plays. The key play of the drive was a pass from Joe Cap to George Washington that was nearly 5 yards short of the mark. Despite the short throw, Washington was able to come back and haul it in for a 33-yard gain to the Browns' 24-yard line. 2 plays later, Dave Brown's 12-yard run moved the ball to the 7. And 2 plays after that, Bill Brown accidentally slipped and bumped into Cap while moving up to take a takeoff, but Cap simply kept the ball and ran it in for 7 yards for a touchdown. The situation never got any better for Cleveland. The next time Minnesota got the ball off, defensive back
Erich Barnes.
uh, slipped while in one-on-one coverage with Washington, enabled him to catch the pass from Cap and off the 75-yard touchdown. Near the end of the quarter, Browns running back Leroy Kelly lost a fumble that was recovered by linebacker Wally Hillenberg on the Vikings' 43-yard line. Cap then completed a 12-yard pass to Washington before Fred Cox finished the drive with a 30-yard field goal, putting the Vikings up 17-0. Later in the second period, Hillenberg snuffed out a Cleveland scoring threat by intercepting a pass from Bill Nelson to the Vikings' 33-yard line. Minnesota subsequently drove 67 yards in 8 plays. Cap started the drive with a pair of completions to John Henderson for 17 yards, while Osborne broke off a 16-yard run and ended up finishing the drive with a 20-yard touchdown burst, giving the Vikings a 24-0 lead with 4:48 left in the first half. So the game was over by then. Cleveland responded with a drive to the Vikings 17, but turned the ball over on downs when Nelson overthrew receiver Gary Collins in the end zone on 4th and 3.
Yep. And then, of course, the fans stormed the field.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was so they have an NFL championship. That was the last one. They won the last NFL championship.
And we've already talked about the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we've already talked about that heartbreak. So
let's end this show on a good note, people.
Let's end this show on a good note.
So
that 69 team was just one of those teams that they should have won it all.
Yeah.
I mean, even though you look at the stats weren't that great, but the way they won games and as dominant as that defense was, they should have won it all. That was, I think either the 69 team should have won it all or the 75 team. 98 you can throw in there. 09, I think they beat the Colts if they make it to the Super Bowl. So it's not like this team hasn't had teams that can win Super Bowls. We have. First of all, you got to be good just to get to the Super Bowl. So, but that first one, and to a man, that first one always hurt. That the one they lost to the Chiefs always hurt to those players that had been in all four. That can't.
It also didn't help the fucking head coach of the Chiefs at the time, him being Brady'd up like he was. Also,
yeah, he was just a cocky, arrogant SOB. I was never. He was kind of a hated guy here in Minnesota because of what he said. Because of what he said in the Super Bowl.
So the team leaders for the year were Joe Kapp with 1,700 yards.
Okay.
Joe Kapp had 19 touchdown passes. Osborne actually led with 643 yards. He had seven touchdowns. Gene Washington led both touchdowns and receptions with 821 yards, 9 touchdowns. Fred Cox led in points. Cliff Jones led kickoff returns. Charlie West led with punt return yards. Bobby Bryant had 8 picks.
Yeah, Bobby Bryant didn't play the whole season.
Think about 8 picks. That's not unheard of, even today.
Oh, he had 8. He had 8 one year. He led the league with 7 one year. I mean, think about it. Paul Cross had 10 in 75. I think now on average, the leader of interceptions may have 5 or 6. That's it. In today's football?
Yeah. At the most.
Well, and plus, with today's football, a lot of the passes, they're those short passes in the flat that you let the wide receivers use their athletic ability to get the yards.
And we were saying the Vikings couldn't run. Okay, so there's only 16 teams in 69. So the Vikings passing offense was 12th.
Yes.
The rushing offense, what do you think it was?
It had to be 14th.
No, it was 4th.
In that era of football,
It was fourth.
they
They
were
averaged, it
fourth.
says they averaged 132 yards a game. So
Okay, if you can you look up who was number one?
Okay.
It's a different era of football, but I mean, my God, well, they ran a lot as a team. I'll give them that much. Um,
So Gale Sayers was the leading rusher. He's the only running back who had 1,000 yards.
yeah, and I think he was hurt most of the season. Yeah, I think he was hurt. Okay, so Gale Sayers.
We're trying to find the team stats.
Okay. Yeah, if you got 1,000 yards in the NFL back then, you were doing pretty good.
Okay, let's see the player stats. So that could be.
Yeah, you're right, Bob. With that defense, you didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot on offense because you had a defense that was going to shut down the opponents. That's very true. That defense won so many games for us.
I think it would be easier to find. So no results for the 1969 team rushing. That makes no sense.
You on Pro Football Reference?
Yeah.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You can take them or leave them. I'm not
So the leading passer was Sonny Jurgensen with 3,100 yards.
okay
Harold
with
Jackson was
Redskins.
the lead receiver.
By the way, the 69 Redskins was the last team that Vince Lombardi coached. He passed away in August of 70. But he was head coach of the Redskins in 69. Came out of retirement, as a matter of fact.
Player stats, fantasy stats. Does not say anything about.
Oh, you know what? Hang on. I'm going to try something.
Let me try Wikipedia.
I think I found it. Let's see. I got the individuals. Let's see if I can find the team.
I think it was the Bears.
Was it the Bears?
The Bears.
Where did you go? Wikipedia?
I'm on Stat News.
Okay.
Yeah, the Bears rushed for 20. They're the only. Actually, let's see. Stat News is not like formatted. It's weird how it's formatted. Let me. Let me see here. So these are the individuals of the team.
Yeah, because I'm not finding anything.
Yeah, I'm not finding it. It's weird.
Yeah, I'm not finding anything. I mean, I've got books and everything. You know what? I'm gonna go off camera real quick. I'll be right back. I think I got a book.
It's weird. You would think with Wikipedia and all the stuff going on today that they would have all this on there. But it has all the, like I said, it's weird that it has all the individual, but it doesn't have the team rankings.
For people that are wondering where I get a lot of my information, I have one of these media guide from the NFL from 1970. So let's see what they said. 69 stats. Okay.
Okay, so okay, so the Cowboys, um, Cowboys. So the Vikings weren't fourth if you go by total rushing yards. Maybe they were fourth in. Is for the team that had the most rushing yards was the Cowboys. They had 2276. Then the Chiefs had 2220.
So it was the Cowboys?
And then the Bears had 2078. And the Falcons had 2058. The Chargers had 9. So the Vikings were fifth, not fourth.
Okay, so who's ahead of them?
Cowboys, Chiefs, Bears, Falcons.
Chiefs are in the AFC.
They were essentially tied. So that's what I'm saying. But if you look at the NFL and the AFL, and so they were fourth in the NFL, but they were like sixth, fifth overall. So the Cowboys, Bears, Falcons, Vikings, and then the Browns in the NFL. Do it that way.
The Falcons ran for more yards than the Vikings?
Yeah, the Falcons ran for 2,058 yards.
Hold on, I got the thing right here. I got to see this. Hold on. I've never taken the time to actually read these things. Oh my God. And here's the thing. I don't recognize any of these names. Butler, Wages, Gibson, Bryant. Junior Coffee is the only one I know.
Yeah, I've heard of Junior Coffee.
Yeah, Junior Coffee is the only one I know. And who was the other one? The Cowboys?
Cowboys were first.
Okay, and they had Calvin Hill, Grant Hill's dad.
Yeah.
He almost had 1,000 yards. Walt Garrison. Here's a name from the past. Dan Reeves.
He went to South Carolina.
Yep, Dan Reeves, the guy that ended up with the coach. And then the other was the Bears.
Yep. Gale Sayers was a 1,000-yard rusher.
So Gale Sayers gained 1,032 yards, right?
Yep.
The next closest Bear was quarterback Bobby Douglas at 408.
Which is Justin Fields nowadays.
He had an 8-yard average, man.
And then the Browns were behind Minnesota.
Okay, the Browns had Ron Johnson and Leroy Kelly.
Yeah. So there's a big drop off though, because after the Browns, it's three AFC teams. It's three AFL teams.
Which are the three?
The Raiders, the Jets, and the Oilers.
And who did?
And then the Lions.
The Jets I know there was Emerson Boozer and Matt Snell.
But then the Raiders.
And the Raiders, I think they had Dixon as a running back, Charlie Smith, Pete Banasek was with them. And who's the other team?
Oilers.
I have no idea who ran the ball for the Oilers.
I am surprised they threw it. They didn't run. I mean, the Oilers have always been a throwing team. Except when they had Campbell. And then the Lions.
I have no idea who ran the ball for the Oilers.
And then the Lions.
And that was Altie Taylor. And
the Rams were the worst running team.
And they had a pretty good offense.
and the Cardinals above the Rams. So the Cardinals and the Rams were the two worst running teams.
God. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching our show tonight. This is actually one of the shortest ones we've ever did.
The Cowboys also had the most rushing touchdowns. They had 17. The Vikings only had, the Vikings had 15. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is one of the shortest shows we ever did, man. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we're like I said, we've talked about doing series for doing season breakdowns. So this is just the first one. We didn't. I gave Tony a couple years of what years he wanted to start off with. He wanted to start off with 69.
Yep.
I don't know what season we're going to do next. I don't know. Seen free agencies next week, so we might do. We've already did like top free agents, stuff like that. So,
well, next week for sure we're going to do our Friday show.
Yeah.
Next week for sure we'll do our Friday show, and next week we'll talk about it, but we could talk another season. We've talked 98 a lot.
Well, we haven't broken down 98.
We haven't broken it down yet, so we might do that one, but we've still got.
We got 09.
Yeah.
We got 201. We got 75.
75, 74, 73, 76. Yeah. We've got tons of years. We've even got
we could even do 61 the first year.
Yeah, we've even got 70, 71. We could, I mean, there's plenty of topics for us to talk about every week. Yeah. So I want to take the time to thank, everybody that comes in, George, Bob, Norpheus,
Mama Catch. She was on.
Mama Catch.
If you guys missed Friday's live show, my mom was on the show.
Yep, she made an appearance. So hopefully we can get her to make an appearance in the next one. We'll see. But just wanted to thank everybody for supporting us. Hit that like button. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob, we did the Love Boat. That was the one that had an advisory to it.
Yes. So you can go back, and if you go through the history of the channel, you'll see the Love Boat on there.
Yep.
It's probably easier to find on my channel because I don't have as much stuff posted as Yogi does. But yeah, it's there. We had an episode just for the Love Boat. It was one of the best shows.
It was one of the best shows we've done. It was. Yeah. And considering I was supposed to be on that boat, I missed it. So
yeah.
And I explained what happened there. But yeah, I mean, we've got tons of topics to talk about. Tons of topics.
Yeah. So I appreciate you guys coming like you guys always do. I think T-Bass has been working. That's why he hasn't been here. But, George, Bob, Norpheus, Bob, everybody who's here all the time. We can't tell you how much because you guys are just listening nonstop. I noticed you were in here tonight. Thank you for joining. Sorry, no stop. I know she got Eric was in here. West Virginia Walker, we had him. So I appreciate you guys coming in here. Like I said, we're just a bunch of guys on YouTube talking about Vikings. You don't have to listen to us.
Yep.
But we do appreciate you more than you guys know. Dylan, as always. Yeah. But hey, Dylan, you can always go back and watch it. This is one of our shortest ones. It's only an hour and 45 minutes. So.
You know what, Bob? We have not done one on drunken driving stories.
We might wait. You want
and the drunken Viking stories. There's a bunch.
140 miles an hour in like an 85, I think it was.
Well, I haven't told the Keith Millard at the bar story.
So, yeah. But my doggy's got to go out. So I appreciate you guys joining. We will be doing our live show Friday.
Next Friday. Not this Friday, next Friday.
Sorry, next Friday.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.
We
don't know what the show will be yet, but it'll be in the thumbnail. As long as it shows up correctly, I have no idea what's going on with the thumbnails. Tony sent me a message saying, "Hey, you spelled it wrong." I'm like,
"Yeah, I sent you the screenshot too."
Yeah, I'm like, "No, it's not spelled wrong. I don't know what you're talking about."
And then, not only was that one on there, but then the one that you did.
Yeah,
was on there, so I had two, and I'm like, well, which
Yeah.
one is it?
yeah. So the one that has the picture of the 69, the picture of the team is the one that I did. I have no idea where the other one came from. So, well, like I said, thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next
Thank
week.
you so much. Have a good one, everybody.
Vikings, let's win this game. Skol Vikings, honor your name. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run out the score. You hear us yell for